If you watch Chop's Garage, then these cars will be no surprise to you, and it's probably no surprise that he mentions them and I turn up here to have a look at them. So why on earth have I come all the way to Devon? It's to test this shabby Nissan Micra with CVT and this extraordinary Daihatsu YRV Turbo 130 with compulsory automatic gearbox. Both deliciously Hubnut cars. We're going to start with a K11, and James, Mr. Chops here, is going to
Can we just clarify though? I thought test drive, I thought you were buying one of these. You don't come to Chop's Garage and not buy a car.
I'm not ruling anything out. Miss Hubnut's not here to stop me. So yeah, who knows what's going to happen. But yeah, we should start with the little Micra, which is showing some delicious patination. So what's the story of this wee beastie?
So the story of this is, in typical Chop style, spending a Sunday evening on BCA car auction site. I saw this little automatic Micra up locally, and I don't watch auctions, I just leave bids and let it run. And at the moment, automatics, people are crazy for automatics, especially small automatics.
Yeah.
So I saw it up there and I thought I'll leave £100 bid on the car. It had MOT, it's got MOT till February next year, and it was a runner driver. So I thought I'll leave £100 in it and see what happens, and logged in on Monday morning to find that I'd won it.
Ah, we've all been there.
So although £100 sounds nice and cheap, by the time we added fees and delivery, we were about £300 on it. It said that it needed a V5, but that actually turned up on the seat on the car.
Okay.
And it said that it had an engine management fault with an engine management light on the dash. It appears the people at BCA made the same mistake I did, and all that was actually happened was the button on the side of the gear lever was pressed in to set the gearbox into low ratio mode. So, but we're still not 100% how well it is. I've never driven one before. It feels a little bit slow. So Ian, you're going to give it a go.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I've never driven a Micra CVT. So recently drove a K11, much earlier one. This is the second facelift, and I must point out a glaring error already, but this wiper should be parked down here. So, you know, you got to watch these traders, you know, a bit suspicious. But it's, yeah, it's, it actually looks, if cleaned up, it'd be a decent little thing. So
the temptation was to just go straight into it and start machine polishing it and seeing what was underneath it and get the rattle cans I'm famous for using out.
Yeah, it would need a good stretch there, wouldn't it? That's lacquer gone.
It would. But I'm beginning to think that actually it needs to sort of wear it. It's got a very interesting thing with mileage on it.
Okay.
It says 165 on the clock, but those MOT warriors that no doubt are on your channel as well will like to hop on and check the MOT and come back with their opinions on it, because it does like a less than sort of 5,000 miles a year every year, and then jumps 110 in 1 year and then goes back to low mileage again. But a dash does say 165, so
curious.
Possible dash swap, I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm sure people will form their own opinion from looking at it online. I hasten to add, I don't think I really bought it for retail. I bought it for fun.
No, it's not your usual standard. I think that's fair enough to say.
I couldn't retail a car of this age and prep it to the standard I'd like.
Yeah.
So it is just a bit of fun. People love the K11s. I've been getting loads of positive feedback on it. And yeah, it's just an interesting little car. You know, when you're in this job, if you constantly just buy the cars you should buy to retail, then it could become very boring. I just buy Hyundai i10s all day long.
Yeah.
So you've got to have a bit of fun with it as well, because I am a car enthusiast after all. So yeah, so I thought I'd leave it as it is for you. And even the auction writing on the dash is part of this car's history. So I think it needs to stay on there for the moment.
Yeah, lovely. Super. Well, we should have this, we'll take this one rather for a closer look. So this is going to be quite an interesting comparison. I recently drove a K11 Nissan Micra. That was a 97 first generation pre-facelift. This is right at the other end. This is a 2001. It's got the facelift indicators with the bit of orange, and around the back the rear lights are a bit more red. Lovely patination there. Like I said, that wiper should actually be down there as it was from the factory. Little bits of different trim. And if we go inside, it's all very different to that early car. They really did smarten things up quite a treat, and you know, trying to modernize it and keep it relevant into the 21st century. So we've got much more grey plastic, completely different heater controls. Oh, look at that. Very nice. And of course we've got the CVT shift, we've got sport mode down here, We shall find out what that is. Headlamp light adjustment, a completely different stereo, glove box with the paperwork inside it, and it looks like they've actually tried to make a bottle space there, which is silly because that's just going to get in the way of the window winders. Just like that previous one, that was a shape. This is an S, which is again I think the entry-level model, so we should have power steering. We've got an airbag, but we're on windy windows. And let's see what the locking does. Yeah, that'll be manual locks, but then we haven't got very many doors, so I don't think this is going to be a massive issue. But yeah, it does actually feel a lot more modern in here, and that's quite impressive. Should we have a peek under the bonnet and see how things have changed there? Because these later ones were available, I think it was a 1 litre and a 1.4 litre engine. The old 1275 had been upgraded. Bonnet release, and there we go. That is a patinated engine bay, but still that little twin cam 16 valve engine, 998cc, and down there the CVT transmission, because Nissan had a bit of a thing for CVT. If you look on my video, you can find a test of a Nissan La Festa, a Japanese import in New Zealand, with a CVT transmission, and they fitted CVTs to all manner of things. They were very big on the technology. CVT, it's the same technology as my Invacar or early DAFs, where you've got pulleys of changing size, and the rubber belt on those has been replaced by a steel belt on these later transmissions. It was a development by the Van Dorn brothers, and it was fitted to a lot of cars. The Fiat Uno and Panda were available with a selector transmission. I've driven a Panda selector. The Ford Fiesta Mark III was available with that transmission, and I think late Mark IIs as well. So it was used by a lot of manufacturers, but really it was only Nissan that ran with the format, and I think still uses it today. Nissan Cubes could have a CVT. It makes for a very different driving experience, as we shall find out. Now, I'm not going to do a windscreen wiper test on this, which I know will disappoint you, but go and look at the other Micra for that. I'm just a bit worried that the wiper will take out this text that we're just leaving there for reasons of history. But also, look at the state of the wiper blades. They have seen a lot of dust lately, so we're going to leave those be. But I'll get you strapped up and we'll go for a drive and see what CVT is all about. So what is the advantage of a CVT? Well, it stands for continuously variable transmission, and the benefit is you can keep the engine either in its peak torque zone or in its peak power. So when you need to get a shift on, it'll go to a higher rev position. When you just want to get going, it'll keep it in a lower torque position. Whereas in a manual car, you're through that and then you're having to change gear again. Whereas this should just keep the revs constant. As we're traveling down the road, it shouldn't be changing. So it's going to be interesting to see how this compares to other CVTs I've driven. Like I say, I've never driven one of this age. Just going to bring the seat forward a bit. There we go. He's quite tall, is that Chops garage chap. So I've got an N CVT button there. And yeah, if I put it in sport mode, no, that is sport mode. Then, yeah, very weird. So apparently that's how it works. Yeah, I've just been looking at the manual. I think something is slightly amiss here, because with sport mode on, which we're in now, that's the button out, we've got NCVT, and I think it should come up with a sport mode. So if I press it in, sport mode is now off. So we're in standard mode. We are good to go. So into drive, like on an ordinary transmission. Then we can hear things starting to move, and away we go. But we don't need a rev counter because the engine is only going to do a few different speeds. I'll do my window up so we can hopefully hear it better. So the engine is now at a very low speed. We're doing 30 miles an hour with minimum bother. I do say I like this steering wheel. It's a bit more chunky than the earlier style. This is only the 1 litre engine. It's not the most powerful out there. That's very strange because that's 40. I'm not flooring it. This is gentle acceleration. The engine's still cold. Temperature gauge just starting to wake up now. So the engine stays at that constant speed Why you got the heater on, Mr. Chops? Blimey. There we go. Might have put the fan on to keep myself cool. And then as we coast, the revs drop away, which is an interesting difference from an earlier CVT. But the main benefit of these later types is much quieter. The earlier CVTs fitted to DAFs, and especially my Invacar, are horrendously loud. But really this should be like the ultimate automatic gearbox, because you want it as smooth as possible, and this is going to be smooth because it's not changing gear. It just doesn't have to do that. But as we said, this car, for something you took £100 punt on, this feels pretty decent. We've got a bit of rattling from the back, but that might be because we're missing the parcel shelf. So we're missing a key bit of insulation. We have got a slight difference in mileage, we reckon, because it's got 164,000 on the clock. The MOT history shows some shenanigans, the mileage shooting up but then dropping back down again. So we think that may be an error. It doesn't feel like a car with 165,000 miles on it. I can still see the grain in the steering wheel, for instance. Right, so now we've got it warmed up a bit. We'll try and go a bit quicker, shall we? Wait for this Shogun Sport. And here we go, full fury. I don't think that's the way to drive this car. That's 50 miles an hour. Yeah, it's a very strange driving position. Driving experience, rather. And then as I ease off, the revs do change. As the pulleys change their position, it says, okay, you don't need power now. Because I think these gearboxes have electronic control, as well as on the earlier ones it was just weights, although DAFs had a system where you could vacuum lock it into a lower position for going up hills. So I think the way to drive these cars is to try and tickle the throttle and keep the revs relatively low, but it's not seeming keen to accelerate up to 60 miles an hour. We still haven't got there. We're sort of cruising at 50. So your kickdown should make you accelerate. Yeah, that's actually slowing down. I think something is not 100% correct with this car. And to be honest, James, Mr. Chops, has driven this car himself and definitely thinks something is awry. Like I say, it's not his usual fare, this. I think he's just bought it, well, he bought it by accident. It's not something he'd buy for retail. Good engine braking though. Yeah, this isn't this is so slow. We are approaching 40 miles an hour. I don't think this is going to be the one for us, folks. I don't think this is going to tow a folding camper back to Wales. Just like the earlier K11 though, they haven't done much to address the road noise. The tyre roar is still quite bad. But CVTs have sadly suffered from people not really understanding them. The people who absolutely do not give a stuff about cars at all quite like them, because it's simple. You put it in D and you go, and there's not even gear changes. It could not be more simple. But car enthusiasts who like driving tended to find the lack of gears disturbing, which is odd, because really it's the same experience as driving an electric car. Seamless progress, and I quite like that. I want that in an automatic. Around town though, this must be a revelation. Just an absolute cinch to drive. Not that the manual Micra has an awful lot wrong with it. Lovely light clutch, lovely light gear change. But if you're in stop-start traffic quite often, then this is kind of what you want. It's just so much less bother. Something else I must remark on is the steering, which is power assisted, but at the speeds we're going now, it doesn't feel power assisted at all. So that's definitely a strength. And also, I've heard the gearbox sort of going into an engine braking mode when we started going down a hill, which is quite interesting. So you haven't got that runaway sensation of a traditional automatic. And for following tourist traffic at slow speeds like this, inevitably there's a Volkswagen Transporter at the head of this queue. Yeah, Yeah, it's very nice and relaxing. If you want to make progress, this really is not the car for you. Haha! We have the check engine light on for reasons unknown. That was one of the things when Chops got this car. It did say check engine light was on. He hadn't seen that, I don't think, but that is definitely on now. Nothing has changed in the driving experience. It could be as simple as an oxygen sensor. You don't really know unless you hook up your bit of kit to read the codes. But now we're on the flat bit of open road, and we're making decent enough progress. We're almost doing 60 miles an hour. In fact, yep, I'm going to call it we're doing 60, but I'm going to have to ease off because it's gone a bit Devonshire. Sightline's not what you really need. They really do a very good tall hedge here in Devon. Yeah, for general driving about, this is fine. Where it's falling down is if you're on twisty roads and you give it a bootful, it takes a while for things to actually start speeding up again. And hills going up, definitely not as good as going down. Woohoo! Good fun though. Proper little go-karts, these Micras. They handle very nicely, which is why they're so popular for auto tests. But you don't see many CVTs doing the old auto test. But yeah, I'm finding if you put your foot down, I think the transmission's slipping. There's always a bit of slip with CVTs, but I think it's overpowering the transmission, so we're losing forward momentum. So the way to keep going is to keep the revs down. Like I say, these CVTs, these modern ones, can be problematic. With the cubes, people generally recommend you go for the full auto rather than the CVT. Oddly, they offered both on the second generation cubes, the first of the funky looking cubes. But then there are some people who defend the CVTs as actually being really good when they work. Typical stories, no one ever changes the fluid. So maybe this would benefit from a fluid change. We don't really know. I doubt we're going to find out. You don't throw too much money at a 300 quid car as this now owes Mr. Chops. You know what I do find interesting though is that I find this car more comfortable than a Primera. Both the Primera and this generation of Micra were built in the northeast of England, but we had a P11 Primera and it was horribly uncomfortable. This is actually preferable. We've still got the slightly jiggly ride that the earlier K11s had. Not quite enough damping, it's just not refined enough. And there again, yeah, come on, build the momentum up. You've got to keep your momentum up with this transmission and this engine. I think this actually feels quite a bit more relaxing than the manual. The manual had very short gearing, so, shut the window again. By 60 miles an hour, it's starting to sound a little busy. This doesn't, because the revs will drop as low as can be achieved to actually maintain your momentum. So the gearing is very different. Oh no, this is a sharp junction. That's not bad acceleration. Holding the revs because I'm in sport mode now, which means you can control your pace almost a bit more 1 foot because the engine braking is quite strong. Oh, I hope you can see this one, folks. It's a Bedford Midi. Oh, it might be late enough to be a Vauxhall badged one. But this is exactly the sort of driving we want to be doing. Coming into a town, it's going to be a bit slower. Yeah, this feels much more what this car is meant to do. It just sounds and feels a bit like you're driving a car with a slipping clutch. That does sound like a little electronically controlled gear change, doesn't it? Actually, it just feels like it just does a short ratio and then goes taller. But I don't mind it. Yeah, I'm going to say this is one city car that's best kept to the city. I don't know if there's a little torque converter involved, because it's got quite a hard pull from the get-go. As soon as you're in drive, it wants to go. So it's got a creep function. Again, that could be electronically controlled, but I don't know what the mechanism is, so I don't know if it's good to leave it in D or not. Oh, there is a cube. Look at that. What are the chances? I wonder if that's a CVT. Well, it's absolutely perfect for this 40 mile an hour speed limit along the link road. but I think we're coming to the end of that, and there will be acceleration again. Uphill. Let's put her in sport mode. Already being overtaken, but we're keeping up with the cube. Close the window for better aerodynamics. $55. Yeah, I would say that's better, but it's still not exactly rapid progress compared to the manual felt so perky, and yeah, this really doesn't. It's a remarkably different vehicle to drive. So a very interesting drive, some very interesting engineering going on, but no, I don't think the Nissan Micra CVT is going to tempt me out of Bella de Bolingo. So the question is, what about the Daihatsu? Stay tuned for a future video on that, but otherwise, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to check out Chop's Garage, where you can find out much more about these cars and many others he has for sale. And I'll see you in a future video. Farewell. Look at that.